So I go into Key Sports because I want to get a pair of hand grips. I've had injuries in my hands and fingers that are now healed, and I just need to build up strength. But I've got injuries in my knees and my hips. And so I go in, and there's a young guy because they've got those sort of checkout lines, and there's nobody there. It's just him, and he's in the shop is. I mean, it's not empty. There's a few customers around. Anyway, I say to him, "Oh," I show him the picture of the hand grips that I want, and I explain to him that, I've got injuries in my knees and hips, and I can't because their weight section and all that other stuff happens to be up on the next floor. Like all their clothes are down on the ground, but all the sports equipment, which is the heavy stuff, is upstairs, which seems pretty odd. And you've got to walk up the stairs, and they've got no elevator. So I said to him, would you kindly ask someone to bring them down for us? And he looks at me and he goes, oh, yeah, I could try. So anyway, he brings upstairs, and they've got one guy up there who's got quite an attitude because he just does. But he stands at the top of the stairs and he throws the grip. He yells at the guy at the till in quite a thick accent, and he throws the grips down, and one of them hits my head and the other one hits my body, and it was really sore, and I yelped more than yelped. I really yelped. I yelped, and the one that hit the side of my face, that bloody hurt. And the guy just walked, the assistant walked away, and I thought, how the hell? So I looked at the guy at the till, and he didn't know what to do. He looked back up he looked at his colleague who had done that, and then looked at me, and he was confused about what to do. And I said, I'm ringing the police. So I rang the police, and by that time, another customer who had seen it came to see if she could help and administer first aid, which she asked the guy at the till, do you have a first aid kit? And he just looked at her because he's just a young guy. And he looked at her like she was talking some strange language. And she said, for Pete's sake, get some ice, get something, because she's been injured. And so of course, my face was starting to bruise up, was because it was red. Well, not bruise up, but it was really bright red and it was starting to swell. And I rang the police straight away, and the police and an ambulance. And I just said to the police, please come to George's Atrium on Ken Street in the CBD. George Atrium, come to the George Mall on Ken Street in the CBD. I've been assaulted with a weapon. Please come quickly. I've been assaulted, and I need some assistance. The person who's assaulted me is still in the shop. And she said, oh, where are you? And I said, I'm in Key Sports. Hurry. And I've got to ring an ambulance now. So she said, oh, we need a description. I said, the guy's, I don't know, 5'5", and he was short. I said 5'5", and he's angry. He's an angry guy, and he's 5'5", and he's going upstairs. Why? There was stuff being thrown around upstairs. You could hear it and see sports equipment flying past this sort of foyer area where the stairs end up the top of the stairway. And I said, it's dangerous, we've got to move within safe distance. And she said, is he armed? I said, well, he could possibly arm himself. This is Key Sports. It's a big sports shop, and it's got lots of sports equipment. It's got scuba diving gear and scuba diving darts and scuba diving everything, because he could arm himself quite easily. And I said, but I'm in too much pain and discomfort in myself to talk, and I need to ring an ambulance. And I said to her, I have to go. And in the meantime, the lady that was assisting me said, don't worry, I'll ring the ambulance. So she rang the ambulance. In the meantime, because it was just so dangerous, everybody was moved out of the shop. At least that was the wisest thing that the young guy had done. He was moving us out of the shop. But within moments of me making that phone call, a whole load of police turned up, and they had tasers, and they were dressed in, the kit. There was nothing, they didn't show up in t-shirts. Like they usually do. They've got their t-shirts on. They showed up full armor and kit, and the guy who wounded me, the retail person, he flew down the stairs, like spread eagle down the stairs at the police, threw himself at the police. No, hang on. Anyway, before the police arrived, the guy came down the stairs. The shop attendant, no, the customer, the customer service. Yeah, the customer service guy came down. The one who threw the hand grips at me came down the stairs, looked at the guy at the till and did a huff, and walked down to the back of the shop. And everybody just started to look at him because they knew by this time that it was him. Because there was only about 5 or 6 people in the shop, and at least the attendant, the young guy at the till, the cash register, was telling people to come towards him. And then the police arrived, and just at that time, the guy at the cash register said, "Oh, he's gone down there." So they go down to go and get him, and somehow he's gone back upstairs because you can hear him because he's throwing things around again. So the police, several of them, go upstairs, and the young guy at the cash register tells the police, "Oh, there's a back way that you can go up through there, down the back of the store." So there's another 4 police officers that do that. And this other shop attendant who threw the hand grips at me, mate, he was going ballistic upstairs, screaming and yelling, throwing things at the police. And by this time, he had the scuba diving darts. And it was possible that they were going to shoot him. It was so scary. They managed to apprehend him without that happening, because normally now, in the CBD, the police are armed now and they just shoot to kill, and it was really scary. So they brought him downstairs. Well, they literally had to lift and drag him downstairs. And just as he was coming past me, because I was being attended to at the same time outside, we were just outside the store by this time because there was a big crowd, and the police were having to do crowd management and get people back and safety. They walked past me, and this guy, the one who threw the hand grips at me, reached over to try to bite me, and not with human teeth, but with like sharp shark teeth. It was the scariest thing we'd ever seen. The lady next to me screamed. The police officer kind of, sort of went stiff at the sight. And then he was trying to whip his head around and bite the police officer. But the strangest thing that happened was that he started to really squirm and want to bite. And one of the other police was trying to hold him down, get hold of him. And they couldn't taser him because the tasering of him would have gone on to the police officer who was holding him, because he was trying to stop him, because the police officer went to grab his head as he went to go and try to bite me. And then he was trying to reach around and bite the police officer at the same time, bite his arm and his face. And then he just did the weirdest thing. He was squirming like I don't know, like an animal that's been caught in a grip, like, the way that a cat does, struggles with claws and teeth to get loose. And he literally went like a bag of skin, like all the air suddenly went out of him, and he slipped out of the arms of those police officers holding him, and out of the handcuffs. And I got to say, there was a few of us that screamed. I kind of cried as I looked at it. And then he blew up into this huge, like, snake with this big cobra head. And it was the weirdest, horriblest thing I'd ever seen in my life. And the guy was hissing and spitting some kind of goo at all of us. And then he turned back into the guy who threw. Then he turned back into the shop attendant, turned back into his human self, and he sprang out of the mall like he was. He sprang out like he was an animal. Like he just suddenly, was able to leap and spring over the police officers, up onto the roofs of other buildings on Ken Street, and he just disappeared. It was the freakiest thing we'd ever seen in our lives. It was so scary. And the goo that he spat at us became like hundreds of ants. And fortunately, the other young shop attendant, quick thinker, ran inside. He says, "Oh, I've got water." They ran down to him and other police officers ran down, got those big containers of water, by the handle, came running out, was pouring it all over all of us. And as that water hit the ants, they just started to vanish. They just disappeared. It was the freakiest thing I'd ever lived through. I never went back to Key Sports ever again. Never went back to George Mall. And I never went back to Ken Street. I did get my hand grips though. Yeah, I went to another sports shop, much bigger one that was also, a department store. But that's it. it's lived with me since. They never caught the guy. Every now and then, every kind of odd time, you can hear howling and screaming, and it just sound like him,